Detective Tapp is a man who could see things that other people couldn't see and had the ability to string together information to create amazing theories that were mostly accurate multiple times. Tapp is a dog with a bone who won't sleep until he's buried it. Relentlessly determined, headstrong, observant, cunning, and creative, Tapp is everything that the new licensed speculators think they are. Tapp is a Doberman in a deerstalker cap. These people are more akin to Chow Chows in a loose tinfoil sombrero. Community's new bone is Springtrap, a bunny hailing from the infamous Five Nights at Freddy's franchise that everyone loves to hate. For the past year and a half, this rotting rabbit has been a divisive figure in the community for many reasons. From the young fanbase of his original game to the controversial actions of his creator, there's a lot of valid reasons to think Springtrap might be bad for Dead by Daylight. However, I think Springtrap would actually be good for the game, in a few ways. Before we get into that, let me clarify a few things. First, I want to clarify that I believe licenses as a whole have become bad for the game. I'm not going to explain this very deeply or elaborate on this here, but the reason I think that way is this. The majority of the problematic maps in the game are licensed maps, and licensed killer designs have started to stagnate ever since the Stranger Things chapter. If you want me to explain my thoughts on this more, leave a comment and I may make a future video on this topic. Secondly, I am not going to be theorizing or speculating on what Springtrap will do, or really anything related to the game and its lore. Instead, I'll be looking at in real life and personal reasons that a FNAF chapter would be good for Dead by Daylight and its community. Third and final clarification is that I'm not a FNAF fanboy. I've only ever played the first two Five Nights at Freddy games, and I didn't even bother beating FNAF 1. Alright, now that expectations have been managed and legal disclaimers have been disclaimed, let's dive headfirst into the Civil War. To start off, we're going to take a brief overhead look at the licensed lineup of Dead by Daylight. I promise I'm going somewhere with this, so just bear with me. The majority of Dead by Daylight's theatrical franchise licenses are from older franchises that all started and hit their peak popularity before the 2000s began. For now, we're going to use the year 2000 as the cutoff for recent titles. The recent franchises that have licenses in DBD are Stranger Things, which was originally released in July 2016, Saw, which was released in October of 2004, and Scream, which is being counted since Scream 2 and the Scary Movie franchise were both released in the year 2000. I know many franchises have had remakes in the recent years and or later installments. However, these remakes and later installments were almost all met with mixed feedback at best and often fell short of the original licenses, so I'm not going to count them. When it comes to game-based franchises, both Silent Hill and Resident Evil hit their peak relevancy and critical acclaim in the early 2000s, allowing them to join our list of recent franchises. We move the cutoff to 2010. Suddenly our list gets a lot smaller, leaving only Stranger Things and debatably Resident Evil. Silent Hill, Saw, and Scream all get cut here, as all works released in 2008-2012 timeframe from these franchises consistently score the lowest rankings in online tier lists, and their rapidly dwindling monetary returns indicates that overall, people weren't very pleased with their later works. This leaves Stranger Things and Resident Evil as our last two. Resident Evil's inclusion could be debated as 7 and 8 don't feature any of the licensed characters predominantly, and Resident Evil 5 and 6 are considered by fans to be, as several diehard Resident Evil fans put it while I was trying to learn as much as I could about the games before the Resident Evil chapter was released, just not worth it, or an embarrassment to the franchise as a whole. However, 5 and 6 are two of the top selling games, so I'm still going to include Resident Evil here. I am also aware that there is an Evil Dead show that was released in 2015, however I'd argue Ash isn't primarily known from that show, and is instead known for giving many young women dendrophobia in the 1980s. This leaves us with Stranger Things and Resident Evil as our only recent licenses, except one, which up until now I've completely omitted. If I were to ask you who new players gravitate to the most, 3 names would most likely come to mind. Dwight Fairfield, Meg Thomas, and William Bill Overbeck. Purposely left out everyone's favorite M16 wielding grandpa, because I think Bill is the greatest example of why Springtrap would be good for the Dead by Daylight community. To younger players below the age of 20, Bill is most likely the most recognizable survivor. Many of these players, Bill's inclusion is a bit of safety in the strange and uncertain nightmare that they've now found themselves in. Being able to play a character that these young players already know and recognize can give a certain confidence to explore and play the game more. Someone who didn't join the internet or gaming culture until the mid-2010s, I was a bit anxious when I first started playing DBD. Played on an Xbox, and admittedly, I was anxious to play Survivor. Despite watching many videos and tutorials, I always found myself sitting in a killer queue whenever I thought about playing Survivor. That changed when Bill was finally added to the console versions of the game. Being able to play as a familiar face gave me the final push to actually start playing Survivor. Unlike all the other licensed characters, which at best were names I'd only heard in passing, and at worst I assumed were original characters. Sorry, Bubba. This was a character I already knew. From having friends over to my house and playing Left 4 Dead 1 split screen on a barely functioning Xbox 360, to memories of playing the game with my dad, I already had a lot of good times with this character. Those good memories provided a safety net of sorts. Once Bill was added, I solely played Survivor for the next few months as I was excited to possibly make new memories with a character whose original game was long dead. I'm willing to bet I'm not the only one. That's why so many newer and inexperienced players flock to Bill. If you've seen any of my other content, I'm a verified Bill main to this day. Because even after almost 900 hours of playtime stretched across several years and 2 different platforms, it's that confidence boost is still there. It might not be as strong, but it's still there. That's the thing. As the real world gets more digital, these digital characters become more real. People are spending more time than ever playing video games and making digital memories with friends of the characters in the games they're playing. I can't be certain, but I'd be willing to say that the emotional connections formed by these newer generations around the characters is most likely stronger than those formed by people in the 1980s around characters in movies. In this newest online generation, who've only joined the internet in the 5 to 6 past years, fnaf is to them what Call of Duty Zombies and Left 4 Dead are to my online generation, or what Resident Evil and Silent Hill were to the previous online generation. Having Springtrap in the game would give this new generation a recognizable and familiar killer. For all things Demogorgon is, iconic and scary aren't really one of them. Stranger Things wasn't made by Demogorgon like how Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street were made by Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger. Stranger Things was made by the protagonists like Nancy and Steve. Meanwhile, Demo, despite being the best boy, was nothing more than a temporary obstacle for the protagonist to overcome. Springtrap, however, is arguably the ultimate villain of the FNAF storyline. Anyone familiar with FNAF's story will know and fear his name. Springtrap's familiarity, history, and more frightening appearance could provide new players hesitant to pick up Killer a starting point to allow them to dive into the Killer side of the game and get over that initial anxiety. I have more to say on this subject, however, I've cut the script here. If you'd like a part 2, let me know. Liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing are all massive ways you can show me that you want a part 2. You can also leave any ideas or counter arguments in the comments. Love to hear what you guys think. With all that said, happy hunting.